Hey friends, it's Mal. Welcome back to my channel if you are watching on my YouTube, and welcome back to Witch Church if you are listening on my podcast. I felt a spurt of energy this morning to do a little Mars retrograde update because Mars stationed retrograde on October 30th. So Mars has been in this retrograde motion for about 10 days or so. And I do think that our theme or our chapter in the storybook is slowly but surely revealing itself to us when it comes to what is our Mars retrograde story. And I think I just kind of felt called to help as many people as I can understand their Mars retrograde story so we don't get too caught up and jerked back and forth by such a turbulent transit. One of my teachers, Adam Ellenbos, he uses the word or the phrase grabbed by the planets, which I definitely relate to. I feel like with Mars especially, Mars is the planet of action and also reaction. So when Mars is in retrograde, I think there's a sort of karmic path that is available to us to potentially create more karma, with our reactions or with the things that we do or say or don't do or don't say. And I think if we can try our best to stay aware and grounded and not get so grabbed by this energy, I think we'll have a better time in Mars retrograde. And this Mars retrograde could potentially be a really I don't want to paint it too too optimistically, but I think there's a sense of rethinking or figuring something out during this Mars retrograde period. Oddly though, when I use the term figuring it out, which is a very Mars and Gemini phrase, I actually don't think we need to sit, in the corner of our rooms, in some sort of, thought spiral, trying to decide which way to go. I think this Mars retrograde, the thing about it is that in order to figure it out, whatever it is, we have to almost energetically align with our integrity, our truth, and our path. And we have to, stay true to ourselves. And sometimes we do need time to rewind and ask ourselves, have I been true to myself? Have I been aligned with my path? Have I been in my integrity lately? And, these things are the energetic foundation of figuring it out, like for instance, sometimes as an astrologer, a lot of the times I think my job, it has me holding space for a lot of people to figure something out, right? Like that's kind of what being an astrologer is in a way. And a lot of times people think they're going to figure something out, in an environment that is not conducive to the answer, right? So like, I don't know, just a hypothetical example. Let's say you got your dream job promotion, but it's across the country and you need to make this decision if it's worth, moving across the country for this dream job. And right now you're living with, I don't know, like a friend or a family member who has never left their hometown. And like an example of, being in an environment that isn't necessarily conducive to the answer. So we can like sit and mull over, should I move across the country with this friend who has never left home, and kind of get a muddled answer. Or we can take ourselves out of our normal environment and kind of go from the outside looking in and see if space, whether that's locational space, energetic space, emotional space, can space away from the overthinking thought spiral of Mars in retrograde in Gemini, can space help us actually figure it out? So it's really interesting. And as I'm talking, Spirit is showing me this weird image of someone trying to like figure out a math problem. And it's kind of like a complicated math problem, and they're so up close to like the numbers, and they have the answer key, so they know what the answer is, but they themselves can't completely solve it to get the right answer. And I see this person like going on a hike and having like almost like a philosophical or like spiritual realization about the magic of numbers. And they're like, I don't know, they're like on the top of this mountain and they're contemplating the number 1, which is the answer to the math problem. But at the same time, they're like, oh my God, 1, the power of 1. I am 1 with the universe. Like they're having this like big awakening moment about, like the power of numerology. And it only comes to them because they walked away from the math problem that brought them so up close to the problem that they couldn't see it clearly in some way. So I hope that makes sense. But that's what I'm kind of getting with this Mars retrograde in Gemini. Don't get so don't put a magnifying glass to the issue or the challenge, because it might just mess you up more. Put down the magnifying glass and almost walk away entirely and go look at something else. You don't hurt your brain in trying to like so vehemently solve the problem. Okay. Now, the other thing that in general, before we get into the rising sign forecast, did I say that we're going to do a little rising sign forecast? Probably not. But sorry, Mars retrograde. But before we get into the rising sign forecast, there's a few other general messages I've been getting from this Mars retrograde period that is square to Jupiter in Pisces, Jupiter retrograde in Pisces, which I think is kind of like this missing ingredient, to this whole thing, or this is the thing we need to go away from the up close and discover something from far away. Like that's Jupiter. Jupiter is the far away perspective that we get when we visit another country or experience another culture. Jupiter is outward worldly enlightenment or perception, whereas Mars in Gemini can be so up close, you're looking at a dust particle, so that's like, even why in general Gemini is square to Pisces. We can see why those two signs have this tension, because Pisces is like, I'm in the astral realm. I'm not even on Earth. I'm somewhere else. And Gemini is up close in the dictionary, like, you know, looking up a word. And Pisces is like, what's a dictionary? Here's the Milky Way. Okay. But I mentioned this in a previous episode of Witch Church, but the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz is an amazing read right now, or a reread for this Mars retrograde period. It's actually helped me so much already during this Mars retrograde period, because some of the 4 agreements that I feel are really relevant right now that Don Miguel Ruiz writes about. Don't make assumptions, which is funny because it is so easy to write a story, make up an assumption about why someone hurt us, why someone ghosted us, why someone, said that to us. It is the easiest thing in the world to make a lot of assumptions under Mars retrograde in Gemini, because Gemini is a story writer. And I don't mean that in an offensive way, but the shadow side to the storyteller is fantasy, right? Which is also kind of a Pisces thing. And again, we have that Gemini Pisces square going on right now. So be careful that you are not operating under a false assumption, especially when it comes to partnerships or ex-partnerships or whatever. Okay, that's one 4 agreement that came to me. The other 4 agreements is about integrity and also why people may lie to both themselves and others. And something Don Miguel Ruiz really brought to my attention is this concept of people lie because they want to maintain their outer image of being good. So yeah, like if you even think about it, let's say, you know, you have a little kid and you see there's a hole in the wall and you ask your kid, did you punch that hole in the wall? And they say no, and like their hand is bleeding. You're like, okay, liar. But why are they lying? They don't want to get in trouble. You know, you are their parent and you are, you know, the ultimate person they are ultimately trying to get love and validation from, right? So of course they're not going to want to admit to you that they punched the hole in the wall, you know? Someone who has like a kid who actually has Mars in Gemini and they're like, yeah, my kid actually punched a hole in the wall the other day. But it's that. And adults, as we grow older into adult life, we still do this. We project, I think, our parents, or we project some fear about getting in trouble onto the world. Because the world is very punitive in a way. And the world does have this sense of parental authority, whether it's our boss at work or just some like overarching big brother archetype of society. You know, we do have this sense that we could get in trouble, you know, in some way. So we lie oftentimes, and we lie to maintain this this goodness of our image. Okay. And I think it's something to be mindful of during this Mars retrograde in Gemini square, Jupiter in Pisces. I'm not sure, I don't want to say that like a ton of people are lying or anything like that, but I'm not sure if, how do I say this? I think there's some people right now, especially those who, again, this is no slight to them. It's not like an I'm better than them because I know astrology and whatever. But I think if we're not aware of astrology, energetic forecasts, or just like not necessarily doing the work in this lifetime to become as self-aware as possible. It is possible that there are some people being really grabbed right now by the Mars retrograde in Gemini, and I think that can result in being out of integrity, potentially lying, or even operating from a false story that we think is true about us, but is actually not. So I think in a weird way, people may be lying to themselves right now. People may be out of their integrity in strange ways at this moment. And just be aware of that. And I'm not saying don't trust anybody. I'm really not doing justice on this. I feel like everybody's gonna walk away from this video being like, great, everyone's lying to me, don't trust anybody. That's not what I'm saying, but I would say be wary of people that, let's say new people, or people that you don't know very well. Be wary of what they're telling you. Be wary of the truth that they are preaching, even if it's something really minuscule. Like for instance, I have a part-time job at Whole Foods, okay? So that I recently just got. And it's funny because I've had like various questions about like just like little things like clocking in and picking up a paycheck and stuff like that. And I've noticed that I'll ask like a few people how to do this, or who do I talk to about that? Who do I talk to about getting a hat, a Whole Foods hat? I will get 5 different answers from 5 different people. And you may be noticing this in your own life, right? You may be asking people like, hey, like I'm going on a date with Jeff. What do you think about Jeff? And you get like 5 different answers. Like you get an answer from his coworker that you know, and then you get an answer from his friend, and then through the grapevine, you know someone who knows his ex, and you get a story about him from them. Like, we're getting multiple answers, and people are giving us responses that may not entirely be in their integrity. And what can we do in this sort of karmic mirror that Gemini presents to us, right? Like, this is why the Lovers card is the Gemini card in the tarot, because the Lovers card talks about the mirror archetype, and Gemini can mirror some really weird things back to us, right? So what do we do if we're not quite sure who to trust or what story to trust, or if someone is in their integrity when they're relaying their truth to us? I would say we need to try our best to be unbiased data collectors for our own selves. I've got a story that I'm not sure if I should share because I'm already at 19 minutes, but let's just share it since you guys like my dating stories. We've got another one, guys. At this point, I'm on Hinge just for content. But Spark Notes recently had a very Mars retrograde experience, let's say, with someone on Hinge that, you know, on Hinge, you can have your little, like, what are you looking for? And there's different options, like people can say long-term relationship or something casual or open to short-term or long-term. There's also this option that is, actually, now that I say this option, very Mars in Gemini, figuring out my dating goals. First of all, what the fuck does that mean? Figuring out my dating goals. I mean, I guess it's valid, but that feels like bullshit to me. Okay, so recently had a very Mars retrograde experience with someone that had figuring out my dating goals on their Hinge profile. So I come to realize that figuring out my dating goals often means that is code actually for I'm not over my ex and I'm looking for a rebound. And I'm going to pretend like I'm over my ex and I'm going to relay to you that we are done. And then a week later, the story's going to change and I'm texting them again. Okay. Yeah, so that's like something. Okay, so that's something that actually happened. Now, I matched with a new person recently who's very cute. They have, again, figuring out my dating goals as what they're looking for. And I'm like, God fucking damn it. Is there one cute person in this city that isn't figuring out their dating goals? So yeah, I match with them, and right now I'm suspicious because I'm kind of projecting that fear of what happened like a week ago onto this new person. I'm like, all right, great, they're not over their ex, we got another one. And maybe that's true, but the thing is, if everybody else is a little bit rocky in their integrity, we have to stay even more grounded in what we know to be true about ourselves. And when we are grounded in our inner truth and inner trust, it's easier to be an unbiased data collector, because we're realizing that nothing anyone does really has anything to do with us, which is a Don Miguel Ruiz concept from the Four Agreements. Don't take anything personally. It's not about you. And then we can just kind of unbiasedly, is that a word? Unbiasedly collect this data and kind of just see through people's actions and words who they are right now. People might not be the best version of themselves in this moment. People might be running around like a chicken with their heads cut off, telling one story to one person, another story to another, telling one story to themselves one day, another story to themselves the next day. The best thing we can do is just observe and not take it personally, and not join the group of people who are running around with like a chicken with their head cut off. Okay. That's my tea. So hopefully this helps, this little vibe check of Mars and Jupiter retrograde in a square. In the next segment, let's go into some mini rising sign updates, and we'll take a look at some charts, and hopefully this rising sign update will help you maybe become even more aware of some of the things that could be happening in the background for you with these two planets in retrograde. Okay, friends, let's actually start with Gemini Risings, the star of the show. Well, not really, but you know, Mars is retrograde in the first house for you guys, so maybe you're feeling this Mars retrograde the most in some way. And also, Mars retrograde in the first house is squaring Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces in the 10th house, okay? And if you see me looking down, if you're watching on YouTube, it's because I'm looking at my laptop, but I'll pop a picture of the chart up on the screen so you can kind of see that first house, 10th house square. But Gemini risings, when something retrogrades in the first house, it really is a question of, am I staying true to myself on my path? And if I am wanting now to go a different direction, I might be planning on, how to do that. It could very much be a strategizing effort or a strategizing time where you are kind of looking at the future. It might not be right now, but you might kind of be deciding, I don't see myself at this job for longer than a year. Or I really like this partner. We've been dating for 3 years. I'm starting to see myself really long-term with this person. Like, there could kind of be some kind of long-term vision coming in, which is kind of like a 10th house thing, but it's also making you kind of rewire your path, which is a first house thing. I also think for Gemini risings, because the first house is the house of health and the body, I would say, feed yourself right now in a really nutrient rich way. Nurture yourself in a very kind way. Take your vitamins and maybe, boost your immunity. You also had the eclipses going through the 6th house, 12th house. Like, if you don't know, make health and feeling good in your body a priority right now. Go to the doctor if you do have a symptom that flares up. But I think in general, maybe it's a time to say, how have I been nurturing myself? Is this moment right now really good for my body? And I don't just mean this in a food shamey way, like, you ate a donut. Like, I fucking hate that shit. But I think it's more like, is this job good for my body? Is this location good for my body? Is this relationship good for my body? Like, health is such a multifaceted thing that has more to do with, environment in general versus zooming in on just like this nutrition, drinking enough water kind of thing. Of course, all those things are really important right now. I would also say Gemini risings, some of you are really busy at work and maybe even getting promoted at work, or like I said, looking at the long term. But I also want you to prioritize sleep and rest and immunity and just kind of keeping your body in check. But like I said, it's more than just drinking enough water. It's like, is this environment good for my body to flourish? Or is this environment actually inhibiting my health in some way? That's kind of what comes through for you, Gemini risings. And in general, I would say general themes. We're thinking about identity in the workplace, workplace changes, workplace promotions, figuring out, how do I be seen more for my talents? Am I doing justice to my talents in this current position? And is this job negatively affecting my health? That's what I'm thinking are overarching themes for Gemini rising, okay? Let's go to Cancer rising, because Cancer risings, you have Mars retrograde in the 12th house. The 12th house can, be a little bit of a spooky place. The ancient astrologers called it the house of our enemies. And the 12th house can have things to do with like isolation and self-sabotage and, our unconscious narratives that kind of might be sort of leading us continually leading us towards manifesting an outcome that we don't actually want, but because we are driven by our unconscious mind, sometimes even more than our conscious mind, sometimes, our unconscious mind can be driving the car in a lot of ways, right? It's kind of like that Freudian iceberg picture. If you don't know what I'm talking about, literally Google Freud's iceberg, and like only the tip of the iceberg is the consciousness, and there's this entire 90% of the iceberg is unconscious. So I think Cancer risings really are, having a come to Jesus moment with how maybe an unconscious narrative, or a narrative that, formed during childhood or formed after a traumatic experience, may still be leading you now. And maybe it's like, I'm gripping the wheel now and I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to rewrite, bring the unconscious conscious, and rewrite this narrative. And I think this goes hand in hand with Jupiter in Pisces in the 9th house. The 9th house is about belief system. So Mitch Horowitz, who wrote Miracle Club, he has this phrase in his book that says, belief is the fee of actualization. Belief is the fee of actualization. I always feel like that's the most Jupiter thing ever, because, what does that mean in English? Believing in the narrative is how we make things happen or how we don't make things happen. So we might actually be contemplating too, like, where have some self-sabotaging narratives kept me from taking this risk, or thinking I'm deserving of X, Y, or Z. This is a real leveling up for the Cancer risings. I'm actually excited for us. I'm a Cancer rising. I'm excited for what we kind of dig up during this Mars retrograde, because I think it could be literally life-changing, because we think of life-changing moments as something material, like, oh, we get a new job and we change locations, which is true, but every material change needs this groundwork of unconscious change. We need to evolutionize the psyche in some way in order to have these changes show up in the material world. So I think Cancer risings actually are setting themselves up for maybe even like the next Jupiter cycle, 12 years of growth and evolution. But first there's like some kind of fear that's being faced. There's some kind of narrative that's being rewritten. There's something being dug up. But it's good. It might be good to dig this stuff up, okay? Cancer risings. The one thing I will say too, because one thing that just popped into my head that might be helpful, because I just led the Ascendant Assemblies Cancer Rising meetup. If you're not a part of Ascendant Assemblies, you should come join us for your rising sign meetup. It's really cool. So I just talked to a bunch of Cancer risings, and something we all felt was an overlapping experiential commonality right now is just feeling really busy. Like, I have so many things to do, I'm so busy. But it's kind of funny, because when we're super, super busy, we sometimes like skirt over, sitting down in silence and, meditating, or we can kind of feel like we're being pulled away from our spiritual practice or just our time with ourselves, because of the material world being really busy. But I would say, really prioritize, no matter how busy you are, Cancer risings, like prioritize that walk by yourself in the morning, or prioritize going to yoga class, or prioritize your spiritual practice in some way. I think it's going to be important, not only for right now, but literally for the next 12 years, and also consider how we sometimes self-sabotage our alone time because there's a realization we're avoiding having. There's something we don't want to be truthful with ourselves about, Whoopsie, sorry. Sorry, Cancer Risings, for roasting you like that. All right, Leo. Leo Risings. We've got Mars in Gemini retrograde in the 11th house. And then we've got that squaring the 8th house, Jupiter retrograde in Pisces in the 8th house. Something comes to mind with like business connections maybe going awry at this moment, or if you have some kind of collaboration going with like a friend or a trusted person in your community, or you thought you could trust them, or you thought they were, loyal to their word, and, Mars stations retrograde and you start to think like, what's going on here? Like, is this person actually aligned with the vision of the project or the vision of the community? Also, now my money is involved, which is an 8th house thing. And, that can be hard because, combining finances with someone is the combining of like energy at the same time. So I think there's some rethinking going on with the Leo risings about what communities, what groups, what friends am I partnering with? Do I need to rethink the contract of this partnership? Is everybody aligned in the same values as me? It kind of feels like, I don't know, like let's say you are designing like a really cool community space that has a lot of like values, community values, like, let's say like using people's correct pronouns and being trauma informed and, all that kind of stuff. And let's say someone who's on your team, suddenly says something really, transphobic or racist, and you're like, oh my God, like, I didn't even catch that. Like, and now you're this piece in the puzzle that like so clearly doesn't fit into the group's vision, so some Leo risings may be going through something like that, like, a partner not fitting in with the vision, or you could be a part of a group that feels like, I thought this group was in alignment, but now I'm thinking I need to do my own thing, or I need to rethink who I've been collaborating with. That could be going on, Leo risings. On the other hand, there could be some, at the end of this Mars retrograde, there could be some better alignment with the groups and networks that you are commingling with. Okay, Virgo rising. We've got Mars retrograde in the 10th house, squaring Jupiter in Pisces in the 7th house. Okay. So I'm thinking that with the Virgo risings, sorry, I didn't mean to make that visceral sound. With the Virgo risings, I think that there could be career stuff going on, but also there could be authority figure stuff going on. Like maybe your boss right now feels really overbearing, or like you're having a conflict with some kind of authority at work. Maybe you're the authority at work and you're having a conflict with some of your, some of your coworkers. Maybe you're wanting a promotion and slowly coming to the realization that you're never going to get a promotion in this specific office environment. And if you do want to level up in your career, you might have to, jump lily pads and go to another company. Also, some Virgo risings could just be rethinking career overall and making a long-term plan, maybe realizing this current job isn't aligned in the long term. Right now, it's okay in the short term, but in the long term, this is what I'm going to be doing. And and kind of committing to that. Even though you don't know the exact details of the how, you're just telling the universe, like, I'm committing to this greater path. I think for some Virgo risings, this does have to do with like education and going back to school, just because the eclipses just went through 3rd house, 9th house, which are the education houses, right? Now, with that square to Jupiter in the 7th house, maybe this is a little bit like, where does my partner fit into all of this? Career change. Maybe my partner is also going through some career changes themselves. And, you know, there's a little bit of like, yes, we're partners, but we're both individuals on our individual path. And maybe we need to acknowledge each other as individuals who are growing, changing, evolving into different versions of ourselves. And there might be a choice of, you know, okay, I'm going to get to know this next version of my partner, and I look forward to getting to know this evolving version of my partner, and I look forward to supporting them in their change and their evolution. Or there could be a sense for the Virgo risings like, I don't really know this person anymore, or now I feel disconnected, or I feel like we're two independent beings who no longer know exactly how to be in partnership with one another. And this could be an overarching question throughout this Mars retrograde period, especially when Jupiter is back in Pisces. Okay. Okay. Libra rising. Libra rising. We've got Mars in Gemini, retrograde in the 9th house, which can have to do with education, belief system, long distance travel, foreign relationships even. Squaring Jupiter in the 6th house. 6th house is work life balance, scheduling balance, really just how we use our time. The 6th house can also be about our health, and it can be about maybe even inflammation, which I think is kind of like a Jupiter thing. You know, Jupiter retrograding back into the 6th house, we might feel like, oh, I'm flared up for some reason, or, you know, I ate too much sugar. You know, that could be a Jupiter thing. Yeah, I ate too much sugar and now I flared up my gallbladder or whatever, and now I need to, you know, do a little detox. That's not medical advice, by the way. Just an example of some things that we could be going through. But overall, I think the Libra risings are really rethinking, how do I even want to do life? How do I want to set up my life? And also, there could have been a little bit of like a loss of faith kind of thing going on since Mars entered Gemini, like a sense of like, I can't find meaning in this. I can't find my spiritual path in this. Like, I'm having trouble seeing God or seeing my spiritual evolution. Something I'm thinking of with this Libra rising thing is like one of the pillars of AA is believing in something. You got to believe in something, and that's not me being like pro or con AA. It's more of a neutral statement. Like, you know, one of their pillars is, yeah, you got to believe in something. It has to be something. It doesn't have to be Jesus H Christ, you know, but it can be anything. It can be astrology, it can be tarot, but belief is the crux of healing in some way, according to their philosophy. And I'm thinking about that for Libra risings. Like, if there's no belief or no optimism even, or no future focus, or no faith in who you could become in the future, or like how you could have an effect on other people in a really positive way, like how are you going to be motivated to change your life? You know, like sometimes I think people as an astrologer, what I've observed is people will get burnt out on life, but can't find meaning within themselves. And then one day they really say, like, what I really want to do is help people. And I actually like to believe, granted, this is coming from a double Pisces, but I do like to believe that, you know, there's something intrinsically in the human nature where we want to help others. I mean, from the perspective of evolution, helping others helps us because we're a group animal and we have better odds of surviving if we have the group around us. So it's actually in our survival's, it's in the benefit of our survival to help other people survive. But I think in a more like emotional, spiritual way, I think, yeah, it's kind of like, how am I helping people in this lifetime? What's my spiritual calling? And maybe there's some questions about that. Maybe there's like a little eat, pray, love kind of journey going on right now. I would actually love to see some Libra Risings. I know not everybody has the means to do this, but Libra Risings, like if you do have the means, go on a little trip by yourself. Go on a solo travel thing. I know that might be terrifying, but like, I don't know, like you could really find God right now if you allowed yourself, or you could really reconnect with your spirituality, reconnect with how you can be of service to the world in a meaningful way. And you could really be stumbling upon that right now. So I think it's a really special time, Libra Rising, and I'm kind of excited for you. Okay, Scorpio Rising. We've got the Mars retrograde moving through the 8th house of other people's resources, shared resources, partners' money, taxes, loans, insurance, inheritance. Even the 8th house can be linked to themes of mortality. So this won't be true for the majority of you, but maybe for one or two of you, there could literally have been a death in the family, and maybe you are either inheriting some money or suffering some kind of financial consequence from this person's passing. You know, funerals can be really expensive, etc., etc. But again, I don't think that's going to be really for many of you, maybe like one, if that. I think it's much more about reevaluating how your resources are connected to other people's resources. This isn't just a money thing. This is also about how we combine talents with other people, how we combine emotional energy with other people. Mars in the 8th house retrograde can be a very karmic resolution energy. We might be like pressing up against some, resolving some sort of karmic story with like a parent or a partner. Maybe, you know, that karmic story has something to do with walking away or setting a boundary. I think of Mars as a planet that rules separation, but at the same time, Mars is squaring Jupiter in Pisces in the 5th house, and the 5th house is about romance and pleasure and sex and children, which is kind of cool. Like, we can even just see, like, why does the 5th house have tension with the 8th house? The 5th house is the house of life, and the 8th house is the house of death, you know? So, you know, you have this square going on, and I wonder if some Scorpio risings could actually be resolving fear of letting someone into their hearts. And I'm not trying to paint Scorpio risings as like, oh, these people, they can't trust anybody, you know, but there could really be like this heart opening thing going on that's coming through in the form of romance or dating, you know, some kind of sexual experience. So, you know, Scorpio risings, yeah, is this a time for heart opening? Is this a time for the expansion of the story and facing that fear? Or is this a time of separating from mutual energies that no longer feel in alignment for whatever reason? Also, for some Scorpio risings, this could just be about paying off a debt. I would say out of everybody, Scorpio risings might have the a little bit of overspending, getting themselves into debt kind of energy here. So just be careful of any impulse spending, because, you know, the ruler of your second house is Jupiter. Jupiter's in the 5th house of games, hobbies, gambling. And then you got Mars retrograde in the house of debt. So, you know, be careful, Scorpio risings, if you're into, like, I know it's football season, so, I mean, just be careful about, like, how much money you're betting in, like, sports stuff. I don't know. Actually don't know how many sporting gamblers watch my content. But just throwing that out there in case you know someone. Okay. Sag rising, we've got Mars retrograde in the 7th house of relationships. And it's interesting, I just had a session with, actually I've had a couple sessions with a couple of Sag risings lately. And one Sag rising was kind of going through, and I say this as vaguely as possible because I would never want to, you know, give out confidential information, but let's say one Sag rising was kind of going through a little bit of like a make it or break it situation with a partner, in the sense that they want to be with this partner, but they also see this next 6 months to a year really being about, like, you know, does this person, you know, meet me where I am, and can we get to a place of equality with each other? Can we get on each other's level? Or is this person actually lagging behind me, like in a spiritual or emotional development sort of way? And maybe I need to acknowledge that, you know, like that was kind of a story I heard from a Sag rising vaguely. Another Sag rising, though, that I had a session with told me they had just met a really aligned partner, potentially the most aligned partner that they've ever met. They were talking about, you know, moving in with them potentially. But here's where the Mars retrograde came in. They were thinking about past relationship patterns with, like, codependency and attachment stuff. You get me. And, you know, they are really having to reevaluate that and come to Jesus with that kind of stuff, so they don't bring in the past to the current relationship, or at least if they do bring in the past, it's for healing purposes, right? So there's been a lot of, like, digging up the past for both this person and this new partner, but it's because they're trying to lay a healthy foundation for their blossoming relationship, which might actually lead to living together later, which is Jupiter and Pisces in the 4th house, which is the house of the home, right? So you can see in those two stories, there's, you know, Mars retrograde isn't necessarily a bad omen for relationships, you know, especially for the Sag risings, but what it is it's a recalculation. It's a I don't know, it's like a reevaluation of our past behaviors in relationships, especially the people that we've lived with, because Jupiter in Pisces is retrograde in the 4th house. So, you know, our partners and our home life are connected in the chart. So yeah, I'm just wondering in general, you know, what's happening in the home life as well. Like, are you and your partner thinking about moving? Are you and your partner going to relocate together? Is this sort of make it or break it situation where your partner wants to go to one city, but you want to stay in the current city? You know, that could be a story for some Sag risings. struggling to find a mutually agreeable place for both of you to root down. That could be something. Sag Rising, you could be like not wanting to root down at all, and your partner's like, I want to stay here. I don't want to travel out of a backpack, you nutcase. And you're like, okay, you know, that's very Sag Rising. So yeah, I'm wondering about the connection between relationships and home life for you right now, Sag Rising. I was going to say one more thing. Oh, the 4th house has to do with parents too. And why are our parents linked to the house of relationships? Well, you can ask your therapist that. But I think we very much repeat patterns as blah, blah, blah. Most people know this. We literally, you know, sometimes date our mothers, date our fathers, date people that have the same wounds that somehow mirror our childhood patterning or whatever. So I could actually see some Sag Risings maybe realizing like the reason I'm with this person is, you know, I might love them, but I also now am seeing like that my wounding, my abandonment wounding has attracted me to someone who has a tendency to emotionally abandon me. You know, like that could be something that is coming through for some Sag Risings. Again, just a hypothetical example. Okay. I'm going to take a drink of my weird green kombucha. Okay. So, Capricorn Rising. We've got Mars retrograde in the 6th house of work life. And that is going to be squaring Jupiter in Pisces in the 3rd house. 3rd house can have to do with writing, communication, our mental space, the narratives we form about our situations. Also siblings. A few Capricorn Risings might be having some sibling tension or siblings kind of struggling for whatever reason at the moment. But let's go back to this Mars retrograde in the 6th house, Capricorn Risings. I actually know a Capricorn Rising who just got a new job and literally arrived to that job like first week and was like, oh my God, I've made a mistake. Like sort of felt rushed into accepting this new job because of their financial constraints. You know, they really wanted the money. And they didn't completely feel like they were trusting in the fact that they had more than this option, you know, but they didn't have, I think their anxiety kind of took over a little bit and maybe, you know, have had them, you know, accepting this position before they were 100%, you know, feeling like it was aligned. And I'm not saying this job isn't aligned for them at all. I think it could become something that they really are able to grow in. But I also think there was something about like the acceptance beginning kind of moment that went a little haywire, which is very Mars retrograde in the 6th house. And even some like regret or some worry or anxiety about the decision they just made at work, which is Mars squaring Jupiter in the 3rd house of the mind. So I think Capricorn Risings could just in general be having some anxiety about work life, even if you haven't accepted a new job, like that example I just gave. You know, there's this little like anxiety. Is this the right place for me? You know, is there something mentally taxing about this position at work? How do I maintain my mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health in this new job or in this job in general? And I think Capricorn Risings, out of everybody, really be careful of burnout right now. Be careful of like pushing yourself, stretching yourself too thin. Because whatever's going on with work is a little bit of an energy drain. You're also kind of worried about money because Saturn's in the second house. Don't worry, that's not going to last forever. And I think things are going to improve. But, you know, I just think, again, don't run around like a chicken with your head cut off. Like, take the alone time that you need, rest as much as you can, sleep as much as you can. Try to prioritize your health as much as you can. Don't stretch yourself too thin. Okay. Aquarius Rising, we've got Mars retrograde in the 5th house of romance, pleasure, children, also hobbies. And then we've got Jupiter in Pisces retrograde in the 2nd house of money. Aquarius Rising, also be careful of sports gambling. Be careful of the team that you're betting on. Be careful about the amount of money you're, you know, putting in the race or whatever. Okay, so I think there's a little bit, though, of a thing going on with Aquarius Risings. Saturn's finishing up their story in your 1st house, which can feel stifling. And I do think there's a little bit about, like, has my focus been a lot about money and cultivating material safety, and to what end? And I'm not saying cultivating material safety is a bad thing, of course, but I think there's some kind of realization here that, I don't know, it's almost like, am I ever going to feel safe if my story is perpetually that I don't have enough, or that abundance is intangible for me? Again, I don't want to love and light like money stuff, because I think money issues are extremely nervous system deregulating, and you know, I'm not trying to say like, oh, just manifest $100 and you'll be fine. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think there's some kind of rethinking of how you have associated maybe money with your worth, and also maybe even discovering with this Mars retrograde in the 5th house how the sense of not feeling completely safe in the material world has stripped you of joy and pleasure, and finding your joy and finding your pleasure, whether that's like knitting or going on dates, even, you know, pleasure in a sexual way. Like, I think there's a rethinking a little bit for the Aquarius risings. Like, it's not a very Aquarius rising thing to think, how do I sort of discover more joy in my life? But I think it's really important medicine at this moment, Aquarius rising, not to get grabbed by everything that's happening in the home life, 10th at home life, career life with the eclipses there. But what activities, specifically physical activities, don't hurt yourself, but like, I mean, don't go roller skating without knee pads when you haven't done it in 30 years, you know, don't do that. But I mean, do some yoga, or do some walking, do some movement therapy in some way, some physical therapy in some way, you know, reconnect with the body, reconnect with the joy of living in a body. I know that can be very challenging with Saturn transiting the 1st house, but I do see improvements in a lot of ways, you know, come this spring for you, Aquarius rising. So just try not to get too caught up in the worries, especially the material worries. I know easier said than done. And reconnect with that thing that you love. You know, go to the library, pick out some books that you would love to read. You know, ask your friend to go on a friend date with you, or reinstate some kind of girls' night thing, that will help you get through the week. Like that feels to me like something that Mars retrograde in the fifth house could bring up. I do wonder, one more thing, I do wonder with the Aquarius risings, like what's going on in the love life though with the fifth house retrograde. I would say be careful of like the exes, be careful of the X-Files that are coming around. Really check in with your integrity, you know, is it aligned right now to be talking to this person, to be sleeping with this person, you know, especially if they're an ex-partner, you know, that might not only be for one or two of you, but okay, Pisces rising. We've got Mars retrograde in the fourth house and squaring Jupiter in the first house. So the first thing that comes to mind with the first house, fourth house square is the concept of psychological separation, which is a term that kind of describes why, like, teenagers, for instance, get kind of angsty when they are teenagers. It's because they're embarking on the process of psychological separation, where they're trying to figure out how to be adults, how to have an independent identity away from their family and their parents. And, you know, it's literally proven, like, psychologically, like, that's why teenagers are kind of like assholes to their parents sometimes. It's like they're trying to give themselves psychological space to develop, you know, to figure out who am I apart from the family unit, because they're preparing, I guess, to, you know, they're preparing to embark on some kind of individual life of their own. But here's the thing, so many of us, well into adulthood, never completely psychologically separate from our family unit. I think this is because of a lot of things. I mean, it could be like parents who have narcissistic tendencies. It could be, like family systems that aren't entirely healthy. What family system is entirely healthy? Codependent family patterns. So I think some Pisces risings could really be maybe setting some boundaries with family right now, like where codependent patterns have kept them from maybe living their own life. And, you know, I could see maybe one or two Pisces risings really saying right now, like, I'm moving away from my hometown, or I'm leaving my home, or I'm, you know, setting a boundary with my mom or dad. They can't come into my home unless they call first, you know, kind of simple things like that. But on the other hand, Pisces rising, there could be some really deep healing going on with the parents. And your parent doesn't necessarily have to be present for this. I'll put that out there, especially if, let's say, your parent was abusive in some way, and let's say you have a no contact boundary with that parent. There can still be like healing that goes on within yourself, because I think fourth house can kind of be getting at the root of some of our most painful things and transmuting them. And so Pisces rising, I'm really interested to know what's going on with your home life. I wonder also if some of you are moving right now or thinking about changing locations. Aries rising, we've got the Mars retrograde in the third house, squaring Jupiter and Pisces in the 12th house. So yeah, we've got a lot of mental games going on with our own selves. Like, we might be fighting the narratives that we are developing, you know, about ourselves or about our situations. And we could just be becoming better communicators during this Mars retrograde in the third house. But it's through a lot of trial and error, though. Like, you know, I think someone, it was Rebecca Garifo, who does the Empath Alchemy podcast. You know, one time she either told me this or she said it on her podcast. But she's one of those people where I'm like, did we actually talk about this individually, or did I just hear you say that on your podcast? Like, but she said something like, yeah, when we first start setting boundaries for the first time, it just comes out, completely extreme, like, or sometimes we go too hard, or we go harder with the boundary than we actually needed to go, because we're just not completely trusting in how much in our communication style, right? So I think in a weird way, I think for Aries risings, a lot is coming out right now, like through the throat chakra. Like whether that's a boundary, whether that's a secret, whether that's something that you've been feeling for a while, that you've been needing to share, but you just haven't known how to share it. Maybe you're finally finding words to speak to an experience that was difficult just because Jupiter is squaring Mars from the 12th. I would say Aries risings could really have a really nice, like, Thoreau in the woods, cabin in the woods kind of moment right now, where you could kind of go away, do a little journaling, or kind of benefit from retreat. Even go on a retreat. I don't know, if you have the means, and for some reason, there's a yoga teacher or someone in your community who's leading a retreat for a weekend, consider going on that. Because when we're really working with 3rd house, 12th house stuff, it's almost like the Hermit card in the tarot. It's something that it benefits us to kind of go more internal and see what comes up for us in that internal space. In the very least, Aries rising, out of everybody, journal right now. Do some journaling, even if you're not typically into journaling. Write, see what comes up. Use the use the act of journaling as a way of connecting to the subconscious. Actually, Rebecca Garifo, who I just mentioned, host of the Empath Alchemy podcast, she literally just put out an episode about journaling, and go listen to that, because that might actually really benefit you in some way. Also, my colleague Cameron Allen, who's been on this podcast before, he tweeted something like about the power of journaling right now during this Mars retrograde in Gemini, and he's the type of practitioner where I'm like, all right, if he's saying it, I'm doing it, because I trust his intuition. So yeah, that's something that I'll put out there too. Okay, last but not least, we have Taurus Rising. So yeah, Taurus Rising, we've just had these eclipses go through the 1st and 7th house. So there's been a lot of relationship stuff going on, not just the relationship with other people, but relationship with your own self and the relationship with your own integrity and all of that good stuff. So I just wanted to put that out there, that the eclipses have been really coming hard there for you. But also we've got Mars retrograde in the 2nd house of money, squaring Jupiter in Pisces in the 11th house of networks. I would ask Taurus risings, where have you been dead ending yourself with your own money story? Where have you said, there's no other option for me? And how can you get yourself out of that dead end and use your connections, which is Jupiter in Pisces in the 11th house? That could be very much like, I'm reaching out to my old college professor, or I'm reaching out to my old peer, or I'm reaching out to someone who is doing something that I kind of want to be doing. It's almost like a LinkedIn kind of vibe, the 11th house. I would say, instead of getting too locked into a narrative about your money story or what you can make or how much you're making and all of the stress that's involved with that, Taurus rising, especially for you, because yeah, Taurus rising, go talk to some people. Reach out for mentorship, reach out for advice and guidance. Be wary of what people tell you. But again, it's like I mentioned earlier, being the neutral data collector of a lot of different perspectives And don't be afraid to put yourself out there and try something new. When we feel like we're hitting a dead end or we're hitting a wall over and over again, it's usually because we are, doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different result, right? So now we have to try something new in order to get a different result. And I am excited for you, Taurus Rising. Like, I'm excited for this overall journey with Mars, stationing direct eventually come January, in your second house of money. Like, I wonder where some of this experimentation can take you. And I wonder, again, by March, Saturn's out of your 10th house, moving into your 11th house. That seems juicy. Some of that pressure's kind of leaving the 10th house. Mars, in your second house is leaving as well. So yeah, by spring of next year, I think there's a lot to potentially look forward to. But right now, investigating and using your connections is important. I'm filming this on November 10th. And even as I talk right now, like, we've got Jupiter and Pisces in the 11th house trining the 7th house of relationships. So, use your connections, past connections, to your advantage. Know which connections are worth rekindling, and also know when it's not worth rekindling, and when rekindling something, whether it's a business thing or a romantic thing, it might be out of alignment or just kind of coming from a place of wounding instead of a place of alignment. Okay? So that's what I have for you all. I hope these rising sign forecasts proved to be helpful in some way. Please comment below, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, I would love to hear some stories in the comments. So please let me know how you resonated with your rising sign forecast. And if you would like to book a session with me, head on over to my website, MalloryHasty.com. All of my links are below. I would love to work with you, and we will talk in the next video.